maybe Nacho, if you could start, like, explain or like make the other side of not necessarily the argument, but like what the concerns are and how they vary between, say, Bitcoin mining and how something like an AI data center could impact a local area's power dynamics.
So I want to thank you guys for doing this. I know I love you guys, what you're doing in Nashville, now you're doing it here for the second time. So thank you all for getting all of us under the same roof. By the way, tough up to follow. Rafa, you put the Avengers and then us, but we'll try our best. Going straight to the sources. I've traveled the world looking for energy. I was a miner. Now I'm the pool boy. So it's a fun side. I'm not into the mix in the weeds like you guys, but I've studied it. I've been everywhere. I've been living in Paraguay for 5 years. It's a country where transmission is lacking, where there's no infrastructure. And we as an industry came in and single handedly saved the country. That country that has a 12 gigawatt dam, one of the biggest in the world, providing power, and they're getting no electricity to retail clients. So people are, I don't know, between 10 and 15% of the year without power. Picture, 110 degrees, no power, young kids, no AC, no nothing, no water, no. So it's really, really hard. And I'm putting that as an example because our industry came in, Bitcoin mining came in, and helped massively improve the transmission situation there. That being said, they're blaming us for those lights going off and boiling the oceans and all the bullshit that you hear because there's a lot of misinformation in media. Thank God we have like people like Nico and you preaching the word and saying what's really happening. But we are means to an end. We as an industry are fast to build, fast to deploy. We pay big electricity bills, and we can help governments, towns, wherever we move faster than any other industry. So we can, if there's power and there's distribution level power, we can be operating in 4 months. Tell me what industry in the world can do that?
But when you say we, you mean Bitcoin mining.
Bitcoin mining,
But
yeah.
now, how might that differ if you introduce an AI data center into
The,
the equation?
the 100% uptime or 99.99% uptime is the key here. So here in Texas, you can curtail. There's cases that have been doing both. You see Data Factory, they're mining here, they're doing HPC, and they found a way to balance curtailment by moving the loads from site to site. They have connections and they develop a software to do it. It's brand new and super impressive. But I haven't seen anywhere else anybody doing it. There's a lot of claims, but nobody's doing it. So if you compare us, that we can be at between 95 and 98% uptime, that means that, for instance, in Paraguay, when the government needs to curtail because there's no AC to keep the lights on in the city, we can do it. HPC can't. There's no way you can do it. So the difference there is, yes, the hype's there. Yes, governments want HPC because it's fancy and sounds great and it's amazing for the country and whatever. But we, on the Bitcoin side of things, can actually do it much better because we have that window that we can, shut off or slow down, or in 4 minutes we can shut off a 150 megawatt site, no problem. Do that with HPC. That's
Yeah,
impossible.
and I
That's
think
the main difference.
yeah, and I think that's really important to distinguish to where it's like it's easy because there are large loads to not delineate between how Bitcoin mining's load is actually different from HPC and potentially, and that's what I want to ask Griffin. The concern is from my vantage point, almost it's like the concerns that existed for Bitcoin mining mostly weren't true, but some of them might be true in the context of large AI data centers if they don't come with the incremental generation that is delayed or necessarily would follow increase in demand. But from your vantage point, Griffin, um, just talk about some of the dynamics that exist with some of these local communities. I think there was just a county here in Central Texas that put a moratorium on AI data centers and did it knowing that there were going to be legal challenges, but the county judge was basically like, bring it on. There was a project in Cleveland, Ohio that just got rejected. That was going to be an AI campus. You have this dynamic where there was the world of ESG that suddenly went away in 2022 or 2023. And, everyone used to, the oil and gas industry was vilified by combination of Wall Street as well as Silicon Valley. Um, and then all of that went away suddenly, and then they need the resources, right? And then there was, I've seen comments from people like Chamath that were basically saying like, hey, everyone's just going to need to deal. There's going to be a lot of AI power demand coming on that's going to force electricity prices up. You should look into residential solar. And that when you put all of those dynamics together, the companies that are leading the charge of driving the demand are largely Silicon Valley companies. Like, how are a lot of these communities, you know, reacting, and is what percentage of it, or on what degree is it valid, and on what degree is it not valid?
So I grew up in Granbury, Texas, where this site happened. There's a nuclear power plant. My dad was an engineer there, and when I first read the articles, it was people talking about the noise. Noise is really going to be a driver of this, but they were interviewing people like miles away, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. Then I find out last night it was like 90 decibels, and I was like, well, they got a legitimate concern there. And what I've learned just being in oil and gas, I started out as a surface landman, just being honest with your stewardship of the land. If a guy's making his living on the land and you tell him something and don't deliver, or lie to him, or the next person comes in and does something different than you told him, that's where like a lot of the real frustration builds. And money fixes a lot of problems. We have a site where they actually live on the property. It's far enough away, but they just had us, build a sound wall. And as long as we're paying them a lot of money a year, for the lease, that makes a lot of problems go away. We've got another guy that is less interested in the money, but, wants his roads really nice. He wants cattle guards. So as long as you understand that they're just human beings, they have concerns. And every time you're on their land, just respect it like it is their land. It's not your lease. And that can just go a long way. Now, the community, I'm out in way dusty West Texas, and they're just happy to have people and action out there. But, uh, finding these sites where, you got a higher population base, you just got to really do a lot for the community messaging. And again, kind of money goes a long way, but it's not just cash. It's certain things that you spend your money on that mean more and go a longer way.
And then if you could just build on that, though, where are, there's a number of concerns. Where are the concerns founded versus where are they not, as it relates to something like an AI data center versus Bitcoin in your mind? Beyond just the load profiling.
I've never been to an AI site, but I would guess noise. This is all going to go back to noise. And the basically we're Bitcoin mining with air cooled units, and they're just loud. There's just no getting around it. And then we switch to hydros, and life is a hell of a lot easier because you don't have a professional just uh, power washing filters all day, and basically that's his job. And then the noise is just going to, as long as technology keeps improving and the efficiency of these hydro miners keep going, it's think it's going to take care of itself. And I think really it's all going to go back to noise. That's what people are afraid of, and then sucking the resources.
Yeah, and then, but what about, as an example, the impact on power prices in a local community,
I,
and how power infrastructure is paid for?
I have been keeping up with this little geographical pinch point in Iran called Strait of Hormuz. And basically, if you were doing 20 million barrels a day out of there, and next thing you know, let's say that number is now 7 million barrels a day. So yeah, 13 million barrels a day going back in the ground and staying there. And so day one, not a big deal, but how long this thing is stretched out, we just recently hit, and you can say with pretty high confidence, 1 billion barrels of capacity out of the markets, and it's not priced in yet. So if you drill an oil well, especially Permian Basin, a lot of gas is going to come out along with the oil. And, the core of the core, you might get 80% oil, 20% gas. The next year, you're going to get more gas, less oil, and so on and so on. Well, also, the core is this big for $80 oil. Now, all of a sudden, $90 oil, you can drill tier 2 stuff. Well, $100 oil, you're going to drill tier 3 stuff and still make money, even if it's 40% oil on the initial production and 60% gas. Well, what do we do with all of that gas? That's where we are headed right now. Is we are -$6 to put your gas into a pipeline in Waha, and any free market is going to say, well, I'll take that gas, I'll generate power. So you can see West Texas having the cheapest, electricity in the world if you just start building nat gas generation on top of nat gas generation. It's sunny, and that is going to be the hub for all. I can see Midland, Texas is just the data center capital of the world, because nowhere in the world can you compete with -$6 natural gas.
Right, but I guess that's forecasting forward,
Yeah.
right, in terms of what changes. And if you looked at something and say, "Hey, there's a 5 gigawatt site that's gonna be built out next to Waha, and that's gonna power 8," that's not gonna have an impact. But if, AI data centers and Bitcoin miners combination are going into, pull on existing resources where generation, might catch up in 5 years or 10 years, but it's not today. Like, and I'll maybe turn this to you, Sterling, in terms of like load. It's like if what Griffin was just explaining is the market dynamic that's going to drive more generation online that should balance, but that increased generation is going to take time, and the demand is there today, right? And so it's competing for resources. So maybe I'll turn to you, Sterling, and talk about, you know, we're all free marketists, right? And I think most people in this room are probably, people that are advocates for energy abundance. What Griffin was explaining is that future is like the free market is going to solve this in the long term. Um, but the utilities and the infrastructure are generally, owned by public utility districts. They've been paid for by taxes over decades, and they're public utilities. So how are those dynamics balanced, with a free market capital world? Because we have to deal with the reality of today versus how economic incentives drive long-term outcomes.
Right. So, like, I'll just point to the month of February at Cholla as our example. So, 19 out of the 28 days of February this year, we got paid to take electricity. And this is just a profile of load zone west as a whole. Like we've got north and south, we've got wind turbines running, east west, we've got solar panels, and we've got a ton of nat gas generation out there. All these culmination of factors. We've got a variable generation profile that has wild price swings in it. And Bitcoin mining is the damper on those price swings and forces. But as far as like generation catching up, like the fact that we're negative on power, we're negative on nat gas, like the load is still not even there yet to consume all of this power that's being produced. And so the growth is needed in order to monetize these assets that are sitting in tax abatements in our county. And I think that's the core of the rural infrastructure problem, the rural communities trying to understand what's going on. So for 70 years out in West Texas, we've had the development of energy assets that have not directly benefited the local constituents. It's been a very extractive process. You bring the oil out of the ground, maybe the head honchos at the company that make a lot of money, maybe they spend a little bit of it there in town, but for the most part, the monetary value of all this energy that's being produced is being realized somewhere else. It's being realized in Houston, it's being realized in New York. And this innovation, which the public doesn't understand yet, is that you can monetize this power in your own backyard. And you have two different wings and avenues to approach that. The Bitcoin mining is the freedom technology, and this is what the local community doesn't understand. I would say to them plainly, you're not smart enough to operate an AI facility, but you are more than well qualified to operate a Bitcoin mining facility. You might not get the same marginal rate of return, but it gives you the ability to monetize the power right where you're at. And that's the sort of mission statement that I'm chasing towards energy abundance with Choya, of course, but educating the local community to seize the day. It's not just outsiders that need to come in and help these folks monetize their assets. It's the realization that you've had it this whole time, and now you finally have a vehicle in which you can take this power and make it profitable for yourself instead of exporting that economic gain somewhere else. Um,
Yeah, I think that certainly makes sense. Yeah, my question was more geared because I understand the dynamics out in West Texas, right?
Right.
Where there's gas as a byproduct that's largely wasted and is a great opportunity to generate cheap power. But if you're in Hood County, that whether power is being transmitted along long lines, it's like there is a relatively fixed amount of generation capacity. And if maybe Nacho, if you could elaborate on this right now, I want to say that Bitcoin miners are being paid about $80 a megawatt hour, 75, $80 a megawatt hour. What are AI data centers willing to pay for power? And, because I'm thinking about sites that are on grid, whether it's, the sites in Rockdale, Taylor, Corsicana, not to pick out Riot, but like anywhere that's not out way in West Texas, that there's a big changing dynamic that's coming because there's a different animal, competing for power.
Yeah. First thing I want to iterate on the community side of things. See what Riot and BDR did with Rockdale. It was a town that was
Amazing.
fading away. People were leaving. There's no jobs, and our industry single-handedly saved the town. They are working with the community. They're active over there. These two massive companies that set their sites over there and change the whole community. So we can do that. We can do it, mixing it up off grid with on grid. You see like what Sangha is doing with solar, mixing with gas in the middle of nowhere, Midland, and they're killing it. So long story short, there's a misconception on the HPC side. Everybody's like, no, they're going to pay $280 a megawatt. Hell no. They will pay for a running site right now, today, that money, for sure. The real price is between 120 and 140. So if you do the math and you're paying, I don't know, 6 cents, 7 cent power, okay, you're in the mix. And like Rafa said, their business is really, really hard to make a profit on. And adding on top of that, it's what we spend at 1.5 million on a megawatt, they spend 15, and they have to build for 2.5 years. If you're the best at designing it, sourcing, and accessing all the things you need just to build a tier 3 data center, you need 2.5 to 3 years to build. So add all that to the mix. And my humble opinion is all this hype on HPC, of course, is happening because markets are following and public companies need to follow the trend and everything. But bear in mind, they sign 10-year PPAs at 5.5 cents. If you are paying 5.5 cents by 2028, you're unprofitable in Bitcoin mining. So there's a lot of visionaries and smart people that are merging and doing HPC and Bitcoin mining. But the main thing is you're stuck with a PPA at 5.5 cents that after 28, you won't be profitable no matter what you're mining with. With a great team, with great strategy, buying at the best moment. Like Rafa stated, we have to navigate those bear years that we all know are going to come and price is going to go down. Everybody's going to freak out, but we still have to mine through them. So you need a great price of power. So when you do all this, mix all this information, you can actually see behind the scenes that those prices they're claiming on what off-takers are willing to pay on HPC, they exist. Yes, for right now, tier 3, pristine running sites. Does anybody know of one of those sites? Have any of you seen one? We're all always running around and we all know where energy is and everything. Building them is going to be a hurdle. It's a really, really new thing. There's no standards. Everybody's building and doing some are doing great. Some are actually going broke because again, the risk, the CapEx initially, it's so massive.
Yeah.
And the return needs to be pristine. Again, you're walking into a contract with an off-taker like whatever, AWS, Google, if you're great at it, or any other company. And if they are willing to pay a premium, they're going to hold you to that premium. So the price is not what everybody's saying it is. The price is, again, between 120 and 140. So do the math backwards. I like to, put everything apart and start doing the math in my head. If I'm paying 6 cents, okay, that's good. I can take it. I'm on grid. I'm 100% uptime or 99% uptime. This is great. But then you start doing the math. I have to put in 15 million a megawatt. And then to return that with 140 at the peak of price an off-taker is going to pay you, I don't see it being easy at all.
Okay. That makes sense. I was thinking about the competitive dynamic and just like the difference, but maybe, and I'm glad you brought up Riot because Wright is the best person I've ever seen do it, Chad Harris when he was there, but it's been continued on of really investing in the community, not just the local Rockdale community, but also the Bitcoin community. So maybe Griffin to shift there of, you know, what is the greatest challenge of Bitcoin miners going to, local communities, pulling on power resources, pulling on infrastructure to, you know, not just be good stewards, but to get buy-in.
I mean, have you ever tried to run a Bitcoin mine? Like, it's hard. There's nothing easy about it. You basically, like you kind of said, with the prices that they're paying for these data center sites, like you have to pitch a perfect game. There is no room for any sort of mistakes on that kind of money. The beauty on Bitcoin is, like we even discussed earlier, experience, the mistakes you're going to make. It's a lot more forgiving. You can kind of learn on the process. But on these like huge scaled sites, I I'm probably not the guy to ask on that. I think I'm more of like the sub 10 megawatts. You're going to see those keep popping up because there's always going to be a market, for that and like the solar miner. But you can tell even the bigger sites, what they're kind of or companies, what they're really struggling with is the basically the people being able to access this site, comparing to having to drive 80 miles to go get machines from here. If you can kind of have them in a geography that makes sense, is where you can acquire a lot of little sites to make, more hash rate. But building like the brand new, you know, 400 megawatt Bitcoin mining site, I think it's just too competitive with the AI money being thrown around that it was kind of a window that has been closing, in my opinion.
But then how do you, kind of, and maybe let me put something out there that Bitcoin is just something that's hard to understand, right? So a lot of people think that the energy that Bitcoin consumes is wasted because they don't understand Bitcoin. But in areas where you might need to, whether it's a local community to help develop the local community or dealing with a local, permitter or politician or whoever it might be to turn them into an advocate when they could be someone that's introducing friction into your process. Like, how do you go about doing that to demonstrate that you are a good steward at regardless of what scale you are?
I think that it's more going to be on a political basis, and if we want to maybe fast forward and see like the petrodollar is actually very late stages and might not even last this whole Hormuz thing. If let's just pretend Iran is taking, passage through the strait in Bitcoin. What does that do to every government around the world? Now they're thinking, oh my gosh, we got to mine. Well, if I'm Iraq and I'm having to shut in my oil and I can't sell it, but I can turn that oil into electricity and start mining Bitcoin. And then all of a sudden you hear Russia's doing it, El Salvador's doing it. So when all of a sudden the game theory of, stranded energy becomes a this is the last million Bitcoin that's ever going to be out there. Maybe we go to this kind of sound money. You might have a gold back yuan, in the meantime. But if a government is saying, hey, we actually need to mine the Bitcoin, they're not going to get in your way anymore. They want to be the most efficient, the most, forward thinking. I think Texas is doing that. You could see it on a national level. And then I mean, game theory's on. It could get really wild out there with just, geography and sound money kind of playing out in the next, I don't know, 2, 5 years.
And kind of Bitcoin sits in its unique spot as the, freedom money, sound money that's also got this energy component. Sterling at, kind of the corporate level of Choya, how do you think though about just general service? Because I know that at least on Gideon's side, and I always never know whether it's Choya directly or other entities, um, y'all are very charitable and you operate with a very big mission that exists beyond the business. But if you could just talk a little bit about how you think about um, community and service and the different ways that you contribute beyond Bitcoin mining.
Right. So, a little background about me. My family's lived in Scurry County, which is a little county out in West Texas, for 130 years. I mean, they were there when the county was incorporated, the town was founded, and been there ever since. I'm deeply entwined with all my community members. I have stories that run back, 100 years. I had this fella not too long ago tell me a story about my great grandfather, about how they used to farm, and he would grow the watermelons and grandfather would grow the cantaloupes, because you don't want to grow them near each other and stuff like that. But you don't get that kind of experience outside of having a history like that. And so for me, being the steward for this new energy abundance profile for my community, I take it very seriously. It's a task in which, not just informing the decision makers, but informing the general public. So I just did this a couple of hours ago. I had responded to a Facebook page. It's a local one. It's the community trash talk page, but everybody sees it. It's got the most touch and reaction to it. And they ran a poll. 94% were against data centers. They wanted to put a 12-month moratorium on all construction in the county. Now, it wasn't an official vote. It was just a statement made by the people, but it comes from a lack of education. And I have done my job fairly well in educating our politicians, our educators, bringing them out for tours, showing them the facility. And I don't know if that's effective for the general populace, but I do know one thing, and that's trust. They need to be able to trust the people that are educating them. They need to be able to trust the people that are in the politician's ear. If I go up there and I lay out 130 years of history and say I stand for this because I know it's good. I know it's going to build new jobs, bring innovation, raise the tax base, create innovative ways to solve our problems. That's what this is going to take to have a real broadband, wide public support, is people with a reputation and a name staking their entire lives on it, because it matters, and this development matters. I did want to speak just a little bit about like the bifurcation of like high power compute and Bitcoin mining. The way you leverage those two entities are vastly different. A Bitcoin miner wanting to stand up an operation might extend an olive branch to other private landowners that have, oil or gas resources, or have solar on their facility or on their property, helping them leverage those energy assets so that they can monetize them in the same way that you are. Whereas like a data center, you want to leverage them for the amount of capital that they're going to bring to the local community. You want innovative ways of, I don't know, clearing mesquite off the land. That would be a great help to all the ranchers around. You hire a few guys, you 501c3 it out, it's a donation, but all they do are kill those water sucking mesquite trees, and maybe they can offset their water usage while they're at it. But creative ways of working with people that use the large capital base to bring widespread, substantial change. And I think that's where those kind of two bifurcate.
Yeah, I think it's the point you made about trust, which is something that um, some company I worked with, it was a communications firm. They explained, I can't remember how they explained trust, but it's like they said trust is not an emotion. It's I think they said a state of being. So it's like, you're happy or you're sad is an emotion, but trust is basically a state, and that takes time to form. And you can't have someone's trust when you absolutely need it. You have to build it really when you don't. Otherwise, you're never going to have it. Um, and Nacho, when we started, one of the things you brought up at the beginning was the dynamics in Paraguay, where there were actually blackouts, brownouts, power scarcity. Thinking about, I think long term, everyone is optimistic about the future. But if there is economic instability or power instability, I think there's even brownouts in California of all places because they had man-made peak oil in 1984. But like, it's very logical if there are brownouts or blackouts for everyone to start pointing the finger. And so how do does the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin miners get ahead of that, today and into the future?
So internationally, you see companies doing it very well. For instance, look at Hive, what they are doing with the running HPC and Bitcoin mining in the same spot, collaborating with governments. I'm talking about Canada, which is very much against Bitcoin mining, very vocally. Paraguay has the total production of Itaipu that Paraguay owns is 6 gigawatts. The peak consumption of the country, 2.5. And they still get blackouts. Why? There's no transmission. We can fix that. We are means to an end. We can do that. So what Hive did now is they doubled down on Paraguay. They brought in HPC, which is cool. The president is very happy. I'm super cool. I have HPC in my country. I'm the first Latino ever to do it. I'm a stable country, and he gets all the kudos and congratulations from every president around the world for 2 megawatts of HPC against a gigawatt of Bitcoin mining. Today in Paraguay, there's 1.1 gigawatts of Bitcoin mining. Probably none of you know about it. And they can keep growing because there's surplus of actual production of energy. They're selling it to Brazil at 1 cent, which is stupid. And that will be done by 27, which leaves an opportunity for us to go there. Canada, the same thing. If you play ball with the government, if you contribute to the community, if you do what Chole is doing at a local, game, and you give them what they want, you can keep growing and keep doing it. But you have to play ball. Like we are doing this. The days of mining, I'm sorry, Tyler, for this, but the days of mining, in your basement are at large scale are gone. So you can. I'm sorry. My house is running on your stuff, so my kids are one thing. Thank you. So, but yeah. So now we need to be focused on that. Like we need to be creative. We need to contribute. We need to be smart, fast on our feet. Again, 2 megawatts of HPC is opening up a whole government to now that wanted Bitcoin out, and now Bitcoin is
it's wild.
best thing ever.
I've got a little to add to that. So we have a pretty good case study that just happened. So the big scary winter storm of 20 or 21, whatever it was, power's out everywhere. There wasn't a ton of on-grid mining and flexible load deployed at the time, and we saw the strain on the system. And you fast forward to this year with the major winter storm that we just got through, not as severe, but the load or the generation profile is what was so spectacular to see. So that winter storm hit on a Friday. Temperatures start plummeting. I know people are cranking the heaters up. The Bitcoin mine was still on, and it ran all through Friday evening, Saturday morning, and finally curtailed Saturday afternoon. I guess they decided they were well prepared enough and started curtailing some of the nat gas gen on the grid. But we saw like a fear response from the public, and then a complete just 180 from what happened just a few years ago. Because of so much flexible load on the grid, there was this ability to shed and push the power to where it needed to be, and ERCOT performed flawlessly while New York was paying $10,000 a megawatt hour. And that was just because they cap it there. It probably would have gone higher than that.
Yeah, and that's a great example. We only got a minute and a half, so I'll turn it to you, Griffin, for the last question.
I was about to say, just really quick, the panel before us, there was this whole, process of doing A, B, and C, and land control was just one of them. Well, land control is one of the, in my opinion, the most important thing. If you hear from everybody up here, it's all about relationships. It's all about trust. It's all about honesty, and getting that from the beginning. Make sure you have a good landman.
Yeah. So the last question is just, and there was something funny that Marty said last night. We were at dinner and someone asked him, he's like, "Hey, are you an engineer?" And he's like, "No, I'm a propagandist." But I think what I'm hearing from some of you guys is like, hey, we need to educate on the benefits, right? There are benefits. How do Bitcoin miners has a Bitcoin community, whether it's individual miners in their local area or more broadly, educate on the benefits using real examples like what happened in the winter storm? Like, what does the community need to do to mobilize to actually have the groundwork of education, for the future?
Guerrilla Facebook posting. I like it.
I think it's the ability to say, I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm going to stop pretending like I'm not right. I'm not scared of the sort of backlash that I'm going to receive from people that are just uneducated. And I think that's the stand that needs to be made. Like if we want broad, wide-scape change in this world, like we're going to have to start acting like we're the ones that understand the mission, the game plan, and have an altruistic outlook for humanity. I mean, that's just what it is.
And how the mediums have just totally evolved to where your voice can be heard instead of 4 primetime TV spots where, the podcasters are out there, the Twitter, it's really changing, and it's going in the right direction to where I think just time and literally Bitcoiners keep being Bitcoiners.
So math doesn't lie. We have the math to support it. Now we need all of us to push. Like, again, what you're doing, what Nico's doing, we have great advocates for us. We need to show our faces and add to that. Keep doing it, keep communicating. the misinformation right now, it's insane. With all the social media shit and all the stupid stuff that's happening in the media, in the mainstream media, everybody's paying somebody to do something to one of the industries. What's happened with XRP and us, Bitcoin. Like, it's so obvious for us because we know what's going on, and this is all lies that are being spread because there's money backing it up. So we need to stand our ground. We need to educate properly. We need to, because again, we have the math. We're not propagandists. We're mathematicians. Like, you put it on your table, do the math, see it. We are the highest electricity consuming industry probably in the world, the fastest to deploy and build. HPC is a little bit slower, but they're getting there. They will get there. But there's no other industry that can compete with us, and we pay very well every month, like clockwork.